I was born to shadows and ambition, and now I unmask myself before you. I am Macrinus, Emperor of Rome, though history has cast me more a transient shadow than a true sovereign. My fate, meteoric and tragic, was written in the stars long before I crossed the threshold of power. It is an ill-fated yet fascinating story of a man who rose from the depths of obscurity to the pinnacle of imperial splendor, and then was cast down into oblivion. This, my defense to posterity, will touch upon my rise and fall and weigh my life's worth, if indeed there was worth to be found. I came into this world as Marcus Opellius Macrinus in AD 165, born of humble stock in the town of Caesarea Mauretania, in the province of Mauretania Caesariensis, modern-day Churchill, Algeria. My family's roots were not noble, nor were they poor. My father, a modest equestrian and minor civic official, instilled in me the values of resilience and ambition, while my mother, whose name history has not deemed important enough to record, taught me the power of discretion and cunning. I was an outsider by Roman standards, provincial blood running through my veins in an empire that scorned such origins. I was neither patrician nor steeped in the old family's gravitas, but this fostered a keen awareness of where I belonged and where I did not. My family, however, embraced the hope that education could elevate our standing. I studied law, rhetoric, and philosophy, excelling in oratory and demonstrating a sharp wit that caught the attention of influential patrons. It was through these efforts that I earned my place in the courts of Rome, rising through the legal ranks with precision and political finesse. My relationship with my family was one of duty and expectation. I was their greatest hope, and thus every step of my ascent came with the weight of their ambition on my shoulders. There were moments of warmth, of pride shared when my legal victories brought renown. Yet there were also shadows of tension when success failed to meet their high hopes. I was driven, yes, but never free. The whisper of ambition would carry me to dangerous places, into the web of imperial intrigue, to the ears of Septimius Severus himself and beyond. But always lurking beneath the ambition was a question I could not quiet. Was I rising to greatness or merely to a fall? You will find, dear listener, that the heights I reached and the choices I made were marked by calculation, risk, and a bid to transcend the limits placed upon a man of my station. And with every choice, every step forward, I walked closer to the edge that would consume me. Now hear my tale unfold, for my journey to the throne would come at a cost, both for myself and for Rome. As we transition to the next stage of my life, my early career and improbable ascension to the throne, consider this. What would a man of humble origins do when given power beyond imagining? And at what price? My journey from the provincial courts of Mauretania to the imperial purple was neither expected nor preordained. It was, in truth, a series of calculated moves, fortuitous connections, and perilous gambles, each building toward a crescendo that would leave Rome both astonished and anxious. I was a man marked by ambition, tempered by pragmatism. As I recount my rise, let me make one thing clear. I did not covet the throne from birth. I simply refused to bow to the limitations that Rome would impose on a man of my origins. In the courts of Rome, I honed my craft. I rose to prominence as a lawyer, serving the state in matters that required both deftness of mind and sharpness of tongue. Success in the legal arena earned me favor with powerful men, and I soon found myself serving under the Emperor Septimius Severus. In the administration of Severus, and later under his son Caracalla, I held increasingly significant posts. My diligence and loyalty won me the position of Praetorian Prefect, a title that carried great prestige, but, more importantly, commanded the loyalty of the empire's military elite. In serving Caracalla, I glimpsed the splendor and horror of imperial power. Caracalla was a ruler of extremes, brilliant and ruthless, adored by soldiers but despised by many. I watched as he plotted and raged, as he bled both the treasury and the hearts of those he ruled. My station as his right hand placed me in the eye of this storm. There were moments when I feared for my life, knowing how quickly the emperor's wrath could turn against even the closest advisor. But survival demanded cunning, and so I walked the line between loyalty and self-preservation with great care. The moment that changed everything arrived in AD 217, a moment I had neither sought nor fully prepared for. While Caracalla campaigned in the east, he fell to the blade of a disaffected soldier, an assassination that remains shrouded in conspiracy, one that I will neither confirm nor deny as having played a hand in. My motives mattered less than the result. With Caracalla dead, I found myself at a crossroads. The army, desperate for stability, acclaimed me emperor. I, a man of equestrian rank, a provincial, an outsider, ascended to the throne of Rome. I knew the weight of what I had accepted, even as others cheered. The Senate regarded me with suspicion. I was not of their class, nor had I any connection to the Severan bloodline. My legitimacy was questioned at every turn, yet I believed that my experience and wisdom could steady the empire, offering an era of cautious reform and stability. Rome was tired of bloodshed, of extravagance, of chaos. I vowed to bring discipline and reason, but being a man of law and governance did not prepare me for the lion's den that was imperial politics. The seeds of dissent were already sown, and my reign was born under the specter of assassination, civil war, and betrayal. Even as I strove to institute fiscal reforms and rein in military excesses, enemies both seen and unseen conspired against me. Thus the die was cast and my reign began. A reign born not of noble birthright, but of circumstance and fate. My predecessor's ghost loomed large, and as we shall see, Rome's hunger for blood and spectacle would never be fully sated. The story of my reign, when compared to Caracalla's, would prove a study in contrasts. Where he wielded excess, I wielded restraint. Where he thrived on chaos, I sought control. But even the most righteous intentions cannot protect a man from the wolves circling his throne. In Part 3, I will show you what Rome became under my rule, and how I sought to steer it toward a path of tempered strength and moderation, a path that would become my undoing. What did I change? And how did my vision clash with those who wielded power in the shadows? Join me as we peel back the mask and see Rome as it truly was, fractured, restless, and yearning for a different kind of rule. I took the reins of an empire accustomed to grandeur, bloodshed, and intrigue, stepping into the vacuum left by Caracalla's turbulent reign. He was a man whose legacy was etched in violence and excess, a ruler who bled Rome's coffers dry in his thirst for conquest and personal ambition. I was different. I had no Severan blood coursing through my veins, no divine claim, no mighty campaigns or monuments to my name. But I had a vision for Rome, a vision of measured governance, fiscal reform, and above all, a return to stability. My reign was not one of spectacle. It was one of survival, of clashing ambitions, and of costly compromises. From the outset, I strove to distinguish myself from my predecessor. Caracalla's reign had been marked by a relentless pursuit of war, a heavy reliance on military largesse, and a callous indifference to the empire's economic health. He had lavished riches on his soldiers, draining the treasury and burdening the people with crushing taxes. His disregard for civil governance had left Rome on the brink of financial ruin, and his violence had spread fear like a plague. In contrast, I chose a different path. I began with the purse. My first act was to reduce the pay of the soldiers, a necessary but perilous decision that sought to stabilize the empire's finances. I knew this would not endear me to the legions, but the fiscal crisis demanded it. I curtailed Caracalla's excessive spending and attempted to rein in corruption within the bureaucracy. I envisioned a more disciplined and equitable empire, one that relied on prudent governance rather than the whims of a bloodthirsty ruler. Yet, even as I moved to strengthen Rome from within, my efforts were met with hostility and suspicion. The soldiers grumbled. Their loyalty had been bought by Caracalla's gold, and my attempts to curtail their benefits earned me contempt. The Senate, which had chafed under Caracalla's tyranny, viewed me with disdain, a mere equestrian, a man of no noble blood daring to claim the purple. My efforts to reform were seen as weakness, not wisdom. I walked a tightrope, balancing between appeasement and pragmatism, each step dogged by whispers of conspiracy and betrayal. Even as I sought peace, my enemies drew me toward war. The eastern provinces were restless. Parthia, sensing Rome's uncertainty, tested my resolve. My attempt to negotiate peace with Parthia was interpreted as cowardice by those who longed for the glories of conquest. Where Caracalla would have unleashed his legions without hesitation, I chose diplomacy, a choice that bought me no friends among Rome's hawkish elite. In time, the very foundations of my reign began to quake. The soldiers, discontent with their diminished pay and wary of a ruler they saw as weak, conspired against me. My legitimacy, always tenuous, crumbled under the weight of military dissatisfaction and political intrigue. When Julia Maesa, Caracalla's aunt, put forth her grandson Elagabalus as a rival claimant, declaring him the true heir of the Severan dynasty, the legions turned. They saw in him a return to excess, spectacle, and wealth, and abandoned me without hesitation. My efforts to restore stability, to turn the empire away from violence and excess, became my undoing. Caracalla had ruled with iron and gold, while I sought to temper Rome with reason. It was a noble vision, but it was not enough. I stood alone, reviled by the Senate, despised by the soldiers, and overshadowed by the ghost of my predecessor. Where he thrived in chaos, I faltered under its weight. In the next part, I will recount my final days, the inevitable fall that awaited a man who dared to temper Rome's ambitions. Was there any hope for redemption, or was the die cast from the beginning? My death would mark the end of my dream. But perhaps through this retelling, you will see the seeds of something more, an ambition not merely for power, but for a better Rome. I did not expect a peaceful end to my days as emperor. It was never in the stars for a man like me. My reign, though brief, had drawn the ire of the soldiers, the scorn of the Senate, and the intrigue of the Severan loyalists. As Rome turned its back on me, my fate was sealed, and the final act of my story unfolded with the inevitability of tragedy. In AD 218, just over a year into my rule, rebellion erupted. Julia Maesa, Caracalla's ambitious aunt, had concocted a plot more cunning than any I had encountered. She proclaimed her grandson Elagabalus as the true heir of the Severan dynasty, claiming him to be Caracalla's illegitimate son. This audacious lie, though absurd to some, resonated with the soldiers who saw in Elagabalus a return to Caracalla's largesse and military favoritism. Discontented with my reforms, they rallied to his cause with alarming speed. The storm of rebellion swept through my legions, leaving me little room to maneuver. I marched to the east with what forces remained loyal, hoping to quash the insurrection and reaffirm my rule. But as my army clashed with Elagabalus's forces at the Battle of Antioch, fate turned its back on me. The battle was chaotic, bloody, and ultimately futile. Betrayed by those I had once commanded, I watched as my ranks crumbled and my dreams of a stable Rome slipped away. I fled the field, but not out of cowardice. I had hoped to rally new forces, to regroup and fight again. Yet even as I fled, I knew the odds were stacked against me. Loyalty was a commodity I could no longer purchase, and allies were few and far between. The specter of defeat loomed large, and the walls of fate closed in with every passing day. I disguised myself, hiding from my pursuers, clinging to the faintest hope of survival. But hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. My flight ended in Bithynia, where agents of the new regime captured me. I was dragged before my captors, stripped of my dignity and my imperial purple. There would be no trial, no chance for redemption. I had dared to rise, and now I was to be cut down. My son Diadumenian, whom I had named Caesar and placed my hopes upon, met a similar fate. Together we were condemned as enemies of Rome. I met my end without fanfare, beheaded like a common criminal in June AD 218. My life, my reign, and my dreams of reform were extinguished in that single stroke of the blade. My body was discarded, my name reviled. But even in death I must ask, was it all for nothing? Was the vision I held a Rome governed by reason and restraint, doomed to fail from the start? Was I merely a cautionary tale, a footnote to the excesses of the Severan dynasty? As you will see in the next part, my legacy did not die with me. While my reign was cut short and my efforts thwarted, the questions I raised and the struggles I faced still echo through time. What kind of Rome could have been forged by reason and prudence instead of spectacle and blood? My death marked the end of an era, but perhaps the beginning of a lesson for those who would dare follow a similar path. Join me as we explore what I left behind and whether it was worth the price I paid. History, that relentless judge, often casts me aside as a footnote, a mere interlude in the blood-soaked saga of the Severan dynasty. But let me make my case to you, for a legacy is not always forged in grand triumphs and gilded monuments. It can be found in struggles, in intentions, and even in failures. My reign, though fleeting, was an experiment in temperance and moderation amid Rome's insatiable thirst for power, blood, and spectacle. Perhaps there is more to learn from my story than meets the eye. When I took the throne, I inherited an empire plagued by unrest. Caracalla's tyranny left deep scars, economic ruin, military unrest, and societal fragmentation. The soldiers were accustomed to opulence and privilege, the people to fear and exploitation. I believed that by instituting reforms and practicing fiscal discipline, I could pull Rome back from the brink. Though my efforts were short-lived, they represented a rare attempt to govern with restraint, to prioritize sustainability over excess. In doing so, I departed from the model of previous emperors who ruled with an iron fist and pockets lined with gold for the legions. My attempts at reform were met with swift and overwhelming opposition. To many, I was a usurper, a provincial upstart who dared to tread where noble blood alone belonged. To the legions, I was the man who had taken away their excesses. My refusal to perpetuate Caracalla's bloody and extravagant legacy branded me as weak and ineffectual. Yet in this perception lies the heart of my legacy, the paradox of leadership. Rome wanted change, but it resisted it with every fiber of its being. My fiscal policies reversing Caracalla's disastrous pay raises and curbing extravagance were born of necessity. Rome could not survive on endless conquests and profligate spending. However, reform does not make for loyalty, and the legions' discontent sowed the seeds of rebellion. While I failed to unite them behind a vision of stability, I hope posterity sees this as a warning about the complexities of governing such an empire. Reason alone cannot tame ambition, and restraint is often mistaken for weakness in the eyes of those who crave glory. Some might argue that my downfall was inevitable, given my humble origins. I was the first emperor from the equestrian class, a provincial outsider who dared to ascend the throne. In many ways, my reign exposed the deep divides within Roman society, the clash between old patrician power and rising meritocracy, between ambition and pragmatism. The legacies of emperors like me are often obscured by those who came before and after, but they shine a light on the precarious balance of power in Rome. And so my legacy is both warning and inspiration, a testament to the difficulty of reforming a system addicted to its own spectacle, and a reminder that governing requires both wisdom and ruthlessness. I failed in the latter. My idealism, some might say naivety, led to my downfall. But was my vision so misguided? Should Rome have continued on Caracalla's path, heedless of the cost? Or was there merit in the discipline I sought to bring? Next, I will reflect on the worth of my reign, both for me and for Rome. Did my efforts matter? Or was I merely swept away by forces beyond my control? As I weigh the values of equality, freedom, liberty, and democracy, consider what lessons my life offers, a cautionary tale of ambition, sacrifice, and the limits of change. Join me as we unravel this final chapter and determine whether there is hope even in failure. Was my reign worth the cost? This question gnaws at my spirit even now, as I address you from the shadows of history. I was an emperor, yet not of the kind that Rome knew or wanted. I dared to tread where gods and tyrants strode with grand displays of power. My reign, a fleeting breath of moderation, was met with the roar of rebellion, the clamor of intrigue, and ultimately the cold edge of a sword. To weigh the value of my time on the throne, I must look beyond my own fate and into the legacy of the ideals I held, dear: equality, freedom, liberty, and the fragile notion of democracy. Rome was never a democracy, not as the Greek philosophers dreamed it could be. But within the empire's machinations, there lay a delicate balance, a need for governance tempered by justice, for order tempered by reason. I believed, naively perhaps, that I could steer this massive ship with the tools of restraint and reform. I saw the chaos wrought by Caracalla, his obsession with power, and the suffering inflicted upon the people and the treasury alike. In response, I sought to mend the fractures, to bring balance to an empire on the brink of implosion. Was this not the duty of a leader? In hindsight, I realized that my vision was radical, not because it promised excess, but because it demanded moderation. Rome's soldiers craved conquest and rewards. The Senate pined for influence, and the populace wanted a spectacle. My attempts at discipline were seen as weakness, and my origins humble, provincial, equestrian only deepened the disdain. Yet equality must begin somewhere. I, Macrinus, was proof that even a man of modest birth could ascend, and my rise symbolized the hope of merit over bloodlines. But for the elite, this hope was a threat. If I failed in this endeavor, it was because Rome itself was resistant to change a beast that devoured those who sought to alter its course. My rule highlighted the tension between tradition and innovation, the need for reform and the resistance to it. I sought to promote a more equitable distribution of resources, to rein in the excesses of power. But was I strong enough, ruthless enough to see it through? No. Perhaps that was my fatal flaw. A tyrant I was not, and tyranny is what Rome had come to understand. Reflecting on freedom and liberty, and I can only offer this. In an empire driven by the whims of emperors and the swords of legions, such values were fragile, fleeting things. But they were worth striving for. If even one person saw in my attempt the hope for a different Rome, one ruled with justice, balance, and humility, then perhaps my reign had meaning beyond its brevity. Perhaps it laid a seed for future generations, a question of what leadership could be. And so I leave you with this final thought. My reign, though brief and flawed, was not for nothing. It was a reminder that greatness is not measured by the length of one's rule or the grandeur of one's monuments, but by the sincerity of one's purpose. I was a man who dared to rise, dared to reform, and dared to fail. And in that failure lies a truth that transcends even the empire's reach. For those who wish to walk the paths of my story, you can stand in the places where my fate was sealed, the ruins of Antioch, the quiet stones of Bithynia. Touch the ancient coins bearing my image, small tokens of a forgotten legacy. Reflect on the lessons of Rome and of my brief moment as its emperor. Our channel, Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to understanding these stories and more connecting the lessons of the past to the challenges of today. We delve into history, politics, religion, personal development, society, culture, and justice to build a more equitable and compassionate world. If you are a seeker of truth, if you are curious, passionate, or just wish to explore what life has to offer, then join us. Share, subscribe, and take this journey with us. Vive Renaissance Spiritus. For history has not died, only our understanding of it has. Let us awaken it together.